In the peaceful village of Gokula, where the sound of drums echoed through the hills and the scent of roasted maize filled the air, love once bloomed so beautifully, it made the elders smile. Saida was the heart of this village. Her beauty was more than her glowing skin or sparkling eyes. It was in the way she treated people. She would give her last meal to a hungry child and sit beside elders just to listen. Everyone respected her, and everyone loved her. Louie was not rich. He sold fabrics in the market, hustling every day under the hot sun, dreaming of a better life. But when he looked at Saida, he saw his future, full of peace, laughter, and home. He didn't have gold or land, but he had loyalty, kindness, and a heart full of dreams. That was enough for Saida. She didn't want riches. She wanted real love. And in Louie, she found that. They got married under the mango tree by the riverbank, with villagers dancing around them, throwing petals and singing praises. They moved into a small mud hut, nothing fancy, but every corner echoed with joy. Louie would come home from the market with small surprises: ripe bananas, colourful cloth, or a carved bracelet. And Saida would cook his favourite yam stew and sing to him under the stars. They would laugh till midnight and sometimes cry in each other's arms when things got hard. Their love was pure. It made others believe. Even the toughest warrior in the village once said, "If I ever find a woman like Saida, I'll give up my sword." People said their love was what legends were made of. Children looked at them and said, "That's the kind of love I want." Elders often told the younger ones, if love had a face, it would look like Saida and Louie. But no one knew that time, with its silent footsteps, would test that love in the most painful way. And when greed and temptation entered Gokula, the drums would stop, and the village would never be the same again. When Louie left for the city of Mwanda, he kissed Saida on the forehead and promised to return soon. He carried his humble rolls of fabric, the same ones he had been selling for years, and left with hope in his eyes. Weeks passed with no word. Then, just when Saida began to worry, he returned, but not as the man who had left. This Louie was different. He rode into Gokula in a grand horse-drawn carriage, his neck heavy with gold chains that glittered in the sun. He wore rich robes stitched with foreign threads, smelling of perfumes Saida had never even heard of. Behind him, servants carried baskets filled with imported spices, silk cloths, and leather shoes. The villagers stared, some in awe, others in disbelief. Whispers filled the air. "Louie has become a rich man," they said. Children ran behind his carriage, singing his name, while elders nodded with quiet concern. At first, Saida smiled. She was proud of her husband, but when she ran to embrace him, he barely looked at her. His eyes slid past her, as if she were a stranger. That night, he didn't eat her cooking. He told the maid to prepare a different meal, something more fitting for his new taste. Days turned into weeks, and the warmth in their small home turned cold inside the mansion's walls. Saida missed the days when they used to sit on the floor, sharing roasted yams, laughing about nothing. Now, Louie sat at the long dining table, dressed like a king, speaking less and less to her. He started staying out late, attending meetings and feasts in the city, surrounded by people she didn't know. His smile faded from her, reserved now for strangers and the mirror. One evening, as Saida softly touched his hand, trying to find the man she married, he pulled away. "You've changed, Louie," she whispered, her eyes searching his face. He looked at her without emotion and replied, "I've grown, Saida. Maybe you should too." That one sentence cut deeper than a knife. Saida sat in their mansion, surrounded by luxury, but feeling poorer than ever. The love that once made them rich was gone, replaced by pride and distance. She stared at the walls, painted with gold, and wondered what price they had paid for this new life, because what they had lost couldn't be bought back with any fortune. Zimena came like a wind no one saw coming. She was tall, graceful, and walked like royalty, her clothes always flowing like river water, and her perfume drifting long after she passed. Her skin shimmered like polished bronze, and her eyes, deep, dark, and powerful, seemed to hold secrets from another world. People whispered that she was from the city, or maybe even beyond the borders of their land. No one really knew, and she didn't say much. But when she spoke, even the loudest men fell silent. Louie was no exception. The man who once sang to Saida under the stars now followed Zimena like a lost child chasing a flame. She didn't ask for his attention, she commanded it. One glance from her and Louie forgot everything. The market where he once struggled, the hut where he built dreams with Saida, the promises he swore with trembling hands. He began disappearing for hours, then days. Saida would wake up alone, the sheets cold beside her. She waited by the window, like she used to wait for him to return from the market. But now he returned smelling of foreign perfume, eyes distant, voice sharp. When Saida finally found the courage to speak, her voice cracked like dry leaves. "Louie, where do you go? Who is she to you?" And Louie, the same man who once called her his heartbeat, exploded. "You are holding me back!" he shouted, his eyes wild, filled with something Saida didn't recognize. "Zimena understands me. She is everything you're not." Those words struck her harder than any blow. Her chest tightened, and her knees gave way as she sat in silence, staring at the man who once worshipped the ground she walked on. The villagers began to whisper. They had always admired Louie and Saida's love, but now the same villagers shook their heads in disbelief. How could he forget Saida? Zimena has cast a spell on him. This is not the Louie we knew. But the gossip didn't matter to Saida. Her world was breaking quietly, piece by piece. She no longer waited at the window. Instead, she wandered to the baobab tree at the edge of the village, the tree where Louie had once carved their initials, promising eternal love. Now, under its shade, Saida sat alone. She didn't cry loudly. Her tears were silent, falling like soft rain on dry earth. The wind moved through the leaves above her, as if whispering comfort only she could hear. And while Louie chased the storm that was Zimena, Saida clung to memories, wishing, hoping, but knowing deep down, the man she loved was no longer hers. It was a quiet Monday morning in Gokula, the kind where roosters crow and children chase goats down the path. But that peace was shattered by the sound of yelling from the grand mansion at the village center. Villagers gathered one by one, drawn by the commotion, only to witness a scene they would never forget. Louie stood at the entrance of his home, his face twisted in rage, and in front of him was Saida, barefoot, her eyes wide with pain, her hands shaking. "You're barren!" he shouted, his voice echoing across the village square. "I need a woman who can give me heirs." The words cut through the air like a sharp knife. Saida froze. The same man who once held her like the most precious thing in the world was now throwing her out in front of everyone, as if she were worthless. The villagers gasped. Some turned away, too ashamed to look. Others stared, shocked by the cruelty they never expected from Louie. He didn't just ask her to leave. He stripped her of her dignity in public. No explanation, no mercy, just cold words and a door slammed behind her. Saida didn't fight. She didn't scream or curse. She simply picked up the small cloth bag that held her only belongings. Some dried herbs, a comb, and an old photo of them smiling under the baobab tree. With dust under her feet and tears she refused to let fall. She walked away, not just from the mansion, but from the life she had built brick by brick with love. 3 weeks passed, and while Saida quietly settled in a widow's hut on the far edge of Gokula, Louie celebrated. Trumpets blared, dancers filled the streets, and food poured from golden trays as Louie and Zimena were married in the grandest wedding the village had ever seen. It was a display of wealth more than love, with silk ribbons, jewel-covered robes, and guests from distant lands. Some clapped, others smiled, but deep inside, many villagers felt uneasy. The celebration seemed too loud, too forced. Something didn't feel right. They remembered Saida's gentle eyes and kind heart, and they couldn't forget how she was thrown away like an old basket. Still, no one spoke. Fear and gold kept mouths shut. Louie, now husband to the mysterious Zimena, believed he had won, trading love for beauty, kindness for power. But as he stood beside his new bride, bathed in applause, he didn't notice the cold in her smile or the storm quietly building in the shadows he'd left behind. After that heartbreaking day, Saida simply disappeared. One moment she was a broken woman walking away from everything she had ever known, and the next, gone. She vanished like mist in the early morning sun. No one saw her packing. No one saw her board a cart or a boat. One day passed, then another, and still nothing. The villagers whispered behind closed doors. Some claimed they had seen her walking near the Kalambo River, where the waters flowed strong and wild. They said she stood at the edge, staring deep into the rushing current, her face calm, almost peaceful. Others said she was seen in the forest, speaking to an old herbalist, collecting rare roots and herbs, her eyes glowing with something they couldn't quite explain. But as the days turned into weeks, the stories changed. One morning, someone murmured, maybe she jumped into the river. Maybe she's gone. The idea spread like wildfire. Some shook their heads in sadness, others in guilt, remembering how they had stood by and said nothing when she was humiliated. Still, a few swore they didn't believe it. Saida was strong, they said. She would never give up like that. But there was no proof, no letter, no body, no farewell. And so silence swallowed her name. Her story faded like old ink. Children who once ran to her for sweets now only knew her name from hushed conversations. Her old home became a dusty storage hut. The baobab tree where Louie once swore eternal love grew quiet, its carved initials slowly fading under wind and rain. Louie never spoke of her again. Zimena, now reigning as the queen of his new life, made sure Saida's memory was erased. Every trace of her was removed from the mansion, her laughter, her cooking, her prayers, gone. It was as if Saida had never existed, but the air in Gokula felt different. The wind no longer danced the same. Some elders said that when the moon was full and the river rose, they could hear a woman's song floating through the night, soft, strong, haunting, a lullaby of pain and something else, power. Still, no one dared to say her name aloud, because sometimes the silence of a missing woman is not weakness. Sometimes it is the calm before the storm. Zimena, who once walked through Gokula like a queen in silk, slowly started showing her true colors. It began with whispers, servants complaining they hadn't been paid, merchants saying Louie's checks bounced. But Louie, blinded by lust and pride, ignored it all. He believed he had found the perfect woman, one who brought him success and luxury. But behind that beautiful face was a mind as sharp as a hunter's blade. Zimena had a plan, and it didn't include staying loyal. Bit by bit, she sold off Louie's businesses, first the spice shop, then the cloth warehouse. She told him they were bad investments and promised they were buying better ones. Louie nodded, too distracted by her sweet words and false affection. Then came the night everything changed. Louie returned home from a failed trade run to find silence echoing through the grand mansion. No servants, no Zimena, no laughter, no light. The doors were open, the cabinets were empty, his safe cracked open, his gold, his rings, his papers, all gone. His hands trembled as he stumbled through every room. Nothing. Even the wedding photo was missing from the wall. A few hours later, a tired messenger from Muanda arrived on horseback. He delivered the final blow. Zimena is a fraud, the man said. She's done this in 4 other villages. She marries rich men, drains them dry, and vanishes. Louie sank to the floor, his world crashing down around him. In the weeks that followed, the debts Zimena left behind began to suffocate him. Creditors came knocking, shouting in the streets, demanding their money. Friends he once shared drinks with crossed the road to avoid him. Elders who once praised his success now shook their heads in disappointment. To survive, Louie was forced to sell his mansion, the same one he once threw Saida out of. The grand gates were taken down, the marble floors scrubbed by new hands. And Louie, he had nowhere to go. He moved into a small mud hut at the edge of the village. His horse carriage was sold for a fraction of its price. With every passing day, his pride faded. He began pulling carts at the market just to eat. Children who once waved at him now pointed and laughed. And every time he passed the old baobab tree, he felt a pain deeper than hunger, a ghost of a woman he betrayed, whose quiet strength he never truly understood. The village watched, some with pity, others with silent judgment. Karma, they said, does not forget. 5 years had passed, and most in Gokula had nearly forgotten the quiet, soft-spoken woman who once walked barefoot with a heart full of love. But on a bright afternoon, the village was shaken from its routine. A line of sleek black vehicles rolled in, shining like mirrors under the sun. Children stopped playing. Market women paused mid-sentence. Even the elders stepped out from their huts to see what was happening. The door of the leading vehicle opened slowly, and a graceful woman stepped out, dressed in flowing African attire, stitched with gold threads. Her presence was powerful, her beauty now glowing with confidence, and her eyes held a wisdom deeper than before. At first, no one recognized her, but then someone gasped, loud and clear, It's Saida!" A stunned silence followed, then whispers turned into loud chatter. The same villagers who once looked away when she was thrown out, now stared at her in awe. She had returned, not broken, not bitter, but blooming. Word spread like wildfire. Saida was now the CEO of Saida Foods International, a business giant known across the country. She had factories, employees in thousands, and contracts with foreign nations. But she hadn't come to show off her wealth. Instead, she began building. A new school stood tall within a week, free for every child in Gokula. Next came a hospital with modern equipment and trained doctors. Even the small temple, where villagers once gossiped about her barrenness, received a massive donation. The same elders who watched her humiliation now praised her in every gathering. She didn't just survive, one said. She soared. When a reporter asked why she returned to the village that once broke her spirit, Saida simply smiled and said, "My roots are here, and I have something unfinished." She never spoke a word of revenge. Her grace made the silence even louder. Her success was her answer. She didn't scream. She didn't shame. She simply rose and let the world watch. Her presence alone made the ground tremble beneath those who wronged her. And Louie, he heard the news while pulling his cart at the market. His hands froze. His heart sank. He rushed through the crowd just to see her with his own eyes. And when he did, it felt like the world had flipped upside down, because the woman he had thrown away like nothing had become everything he could never be. The sun was high and golden on the day of the hospital's grand opening. Villagers gathered in hundreds, dressed in their finest clothes. Drummers played, and the atmosphere buzzed with celebration and curiosity. A large stage stood at the center, adorned with colorful fabrics, and a banner that read, "Saida Health Center for the people of Gokula." Saida stepped onto the stage with the same grace and confidence she had returned with. But today, there was something different. Standing beside her was a tall, handsome young man, wearing a crisp lawyer's robe. His posture was strong, his eyes sharp, and his resemblance to Saida undeniable. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as people tried to guess who he was. Then, Saida raised her hand and spoke into the microphone, her voice calm but firm. "Before we begin this celebration," she said, "there is someone I want you all to meet." She turned to the young man and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "This is my son. His name is Kamba, born 3 months after I was thrown out of my home." The crowd went silent. You could hear a pin drop, and then the gasps came, sharp, loud, shocked. Faces turned, mouths open. The same villagers who had watched her leave in shame now stood frozen in disbelief. But Louie said you were barren," someone shouted from the crowd. Saida didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. She simply turned her face toward the crowd, her expression stone cold. He never waited long enough to find out. Louie, who had been watching from the back, felt the ground disappear beneath him. The words hit like a thunderstorm. His legs grew weak. His head spun. His lies, now exposed before everyone. Kamba then stepped forward, his voice steady and filled with quiet power. "I was raised in strength, not bitterness," he said, looking out at the crowd. "But now the truth must be known. My mother did not lose. She was pushed down, and she rose. She didn't come back to boast. She came back to heal the same place that once wounded her." People began to nod, some wiping tears. Others looked down in shame. Saida stood silently beside her son, her eyes holding stories of pain, survival, and victory. And in that moment, her silence said more than words ever could. This was no longer just a hospital opening. It was the day Gokula saw the truth unfold like sunrise after a long night. The day Saida's hidden strength was revealed to the world, and the day Louie realized what he had truly lost. Louie stood hidden behind a tree, his eyes filled with disbelief as he watched the people of Gokula celebrate Saida's success. His heart sank as he saw the joy in their faces, the respect they now had for her. The same people who had once whispered behind her back, laughed at her humiliation. He had never imagined this would be her fate. He had imagined her as nothing more than a broken woman, cast aside. But now, there she was, standing tall, powerful, and respected by all. Louis's clothes were ragged, his face unshaven, his once proud posture now slumped with defeat. The mansion he had once owned had been sold to pay off his growing debts, and now he wandered the streets with no home, no money, nothing left but the wreckage of his own choices. He had gambled his love, his family, and his future on his lust for Zimena, and now he had nothing to show for it. The streets felt colder than they ever had before. He watched Saida, surrounded by the villagers, sharing food and laughter. The weight of his own actions crashed down on him like a tidal wave. He had betrayed her, he had humiliated her, and now she was thriving without him. In that moment, he realized how foolish and selfish he had been. With a deep breath, Louie made his way toward her, his feet heavy on the ground. His heart was pounding in his chest, and his hands trembled as he approached her, humbled by the reality of his own downfall. He stood before her, his eyes full of regret, his voice shaking. "Saida, please, forgive me. Just a little food." Saida didn't look surprised. She had seen him approach, knew he would come eventually, but her face held no anger. There was no hatred in her eyes, just quiet, measured calm. She handed him a warm plate of jollof rice, the very dish he used to enjoy when things were simple and full of love. The scent of the food mixed with the fresh air, and for a moment, the world seemed to slow down. "Eat, Louie. That's all I have left for you," she said softly, her voice not cold but distant. Louie took the plate from her hands, his fingers trembling. He could barely hold it as he stared at the food, the tears starting to well up in his eyes. His chest heaved with quiet sobs. He had lost everything, his wealth, his pride, and most painfully, the love of the woman who had stood by him through it all. "I was blind," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Saida looked at him, her gaze calm and unwavering. "No," she replied gently. "You saw exactly what you wanted and missed what you needed." Her words hit him like a slap in the face. He had seen the world through his own desires, his own ego, and in doing so, he had lost the one thing that had truly mattered. As he sat there, holding the plate of rice in his hands, he realized that it wasn't just food he was craving. It was the forgiveness he didn't deserve. But even in his deepest shame, Saida's kindness never wavered. As Saida turned away, her steps steady and resolute, Louie's knees buckled, and he collapsed to the ground. The weight of his regret crushed him, and for the first time in years, he understood the depth of his mistakes. His hands trembled as he pressed them to the earth, as if trying to ground himself in the reality he had created. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't escape the truth. The life he had built on lies, lust, and pride had crumbled into nothingness, and now the woman he had betrayed stood above him, unbroken, unbowed, and beyond reach. Louie wanted to call out to her, to beg her for another chance, but the words wouldn't come. He had already said everything that needed to be said in his actions, and now Saida's silence was the loudest lesson of all. She didn't look back. There was no need to. She had already forgiven him, not because he deserved it, but because she had learned to rise from the pain, and she wasn't going to allow his brokenness to hold her back any longer. Her silence was the final rebuke, a reminder that some things, once lost, can never be regained. As Saida walked away, the villagers began to whisper. Her story would be told for generations. The woman who had been cast aside, who had been humiliated and abandoned, had come back stronger than ever. She had built an empire, a legacy, and a future. The same people who once doubted her, who once turned their backs on her, now spoke her name with awe and respect. She had done what no one else could. She had turned her pain into power, and in doing so, she had outgrown the very people who had once looked down on her. The moral of her story was clear, and it rang out through the village like a bell that would never stop tolling. Never betray gold for glitter. One day, the glitter will fade, and the gold will shine before the world. Saida had been the gold all along. While Louie had chased after the fleeting beauty of glitter, it was Saida's strength, resilience, and integrity that had truly made her shine. Now, her golden spirit was a beacon for all who had the wisdom to see it. Louie, still kneeling on the ground, was left alone with his shattered dreams. The glitter of his past had faded, and he was left with nothing but the empty space where his ego and desires once lived. In that moment, he understood the price of his choices, but it was too late. Saida had already claimed her victory, one not of riches or power, but of something far more valuable: self-respect, dignity, and the ability to rise again after the fall. If you've felt the power of Saida's journey, if you've ever been inspired by how someone can rise from the ashes of betrayal and build something greater than ever before, then don't let this story fade away. Share this powerful message with your friends and loved ones. Let them see that no matter how deep the pain or how dark the betrayal, there's always a way to rise, rebuild, and shine. Just like Saida, we all have the strength within us to overcome life's toughest challenges. And when we do, it's not just about what we've achieved, but the lessons we carry with us, the people we help, and the legacy we leave behind. So, if you believe in the power of resilience, in the beauty of redemption, and in the strength that comes from within, don't forget to hit that like button, share this story with others, and subscribe to this channel for more powerful, heartwarming tales. Your support helps keep these stories alive and brings more inspiration to those who need it. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of this journey. And remember, never give up on your dreams, because the greatest victories are often born from the deepest struggles.